Good morning again. This is Daniel Okinawa. I wish to do a presentation this morning on healing the land because it's a very important topic for us. There's a Chief Dana Barry from the Penobscot tribe in Maine, and he said, "We offer our pain and suffering up to the Creator in order to heal everyone around us," which I think is very true. And so, why does the land need healing, you might ask? Well, there's been a violation of protocol by the gatekeepers of this country are First Nations people. And so when the Western settlers came over, they bypassed the gatekeepers. They did not receive a blessing from the gatekeepers. Instead, they came in with manifest destiny. We're here to take over. We're here to come in and remove the savages, which they determined through eugenics, which we were bad DNA. And so instead of going through the gatekeepers and saying, we'd like to come in with permission, they bypassed and said, we don't need that. We're here to conquer. We're here to take over, with few exceptions. In New England, with the people that came over in the Mayflower, they had a couple of generations of contextualized experience with First Nations people, which I honor. There was a city on the hill for a couple of generations. There also is a major violation of the treaties that were signed. 99.9% of all treaties have been violated by those who initiated the treaties, which are the Western settlers. And so with that violation comes a curse on the land, because it's like those are lies that are there. And so, in a sense, they lied to get a hold of our land, get a hold of our people. Also, they began a process of genocide and of forced removal, a process of racial cleansing, which was really a violation of humanity and being human. And then they forced remove our children to boarding schools. Up in Canada, they came with gunboats and rounded up the children and began to put them into assimilation boarding schools, where they removed their name, their culture, their language, and they basically robbed them of their identity and took away all relatives and everything. Then they put them in pedophile rings for the pleasure of the priest. Castrations, smallpox blankets. A lot of children were murdered and savagely attacked by what was known as the church that came over in the name of Jesus. And so basically, I think what took place with Auschwitz in Germany was following the example of what took place in the boarding schools, even up until the late 60s. And can you imagine having your name and your culture stripped, and your language and your identity taken from you, and your relatives? You no longer could have a brother or sister. You could no longer have mother and father. In order to become westernized. So the saying was, kill the Indian, save the child. And we know there was massive amounts of abuse done in the boarding schools. Also, there were murder of Native leaders under the flag of truce. A classic example of that was what led to the Mothman curse up in the Ohio Valley, where a chief and his son under the flag of truce were brutally murdered in the fort. There were massacres that took place. Wounded Knee, Sand Creek, a massacre of those who basically were unarmed, where the armies would take Gatling guns and slaughter them, and then come in and cut open the wombs of women with child and kill the child in the womb. All kinds of horrendous massacres put in mass graves. A lot of these things have not been accounted for. As a result, the land became cursed. Also, the raping of our resources. Gold was found up in the Black Hills, so they removed the Lakota from their homeland. gold was found in Georgia on the Cherokee. So they put them on the Trail of Tears in order to obtain wealth and the lands of the Cherokee. And so the land became sick as a result of it. Also polluting the environment. The environment began to get polluted with these cities that were raised up. There was a destruction of native values and spirituality. We were taught that the drum was satanic and that our flutes were satanic, our dances were satanic. Little did they know these were items of worship of the Creator. And then finally, we were imprisoned we as indigenous people were imprisoned on prison camp reservations, which are still in existence today. And so it's like, no wonder the land needs healing, because there's been a curse there as a result of all these abuses. In Canada, they've had a Restoration, Reconciliation, Forgiveness covenant brought through and resulted in the healing of the land. And I want to give an example of that at the end. And it came as a result of the Prime Minister repenting in tears for what had been done in the boarding schools, calling for a response from First Nations people, Indigenous people. And so friends of mine went to different tribes and had them sign a covenant of reconciliation, forgiveness. 2 years later, in Ottawa, this reconciliation, forgiveness covenant was signed. As a result, the land came back into healing. Streams that had not had salmon in them for years started filling up with salmon because the curse was lifted. And so it's so important to heal the land. They did the protocol for the Winter Olympics of the First Nations people, and as a result, Canada won more gold medals that year than any other year in their history. So we have a choice as Native people. We can live in the bitterness of multi-generational grief and wounds and result in addiction, poverty, and loss of cultural restoration. And so, as a result, after 500 years of Native existence, alcoholism mortality is 770% greater than for all races. Tuberculosis is 750% greater than all Americans. Diabetes is 6.8% greater than all Americans. Accidental deaths are 280% higher. Suicides are 190% higher. 1 in 6 Native adolescents attempt suicide. And so on it goes. The rate of poverty is 75% higher than other races. 52% finish high school. Only 17% finish college, and 2% attend graduate school. And so as you see, that it's resulted in a curse on the land. And so Chief Dana Barry said, you have to learn your culture and restore your culture and learn your native tongue, because the future of the planet is in native wisdom. And so that's the purpose of this broadcast, is to learn to do that. And the second option, other than living in multi-generational grief and bitterness, is working towards healing, reconciliation, forgiveness, and in our great culture, and restore that which has been taken from us, and restore the vision that the Creator has given to us. And so I would like to read a covenant that's been adapted for North America from Canada. This is the same covenant that they've signed in Canada. And I'd like to read this through and then conclude with a drum song. We, First Peoples of America, have lived in a state of intergenerational bitterness, hatred, mistrust of our white brothers, because our past history includes forced removal from our ancient lands, genocide, racial cleansing, forced Western assimilation, and abuse of boarding schools and broken treaties and covenants. Because of this, we as Native Americans have assumed a racial inferiority and have given up our high values and ancient cultural ways to become part of Manifest Destiny, a melting pot amalgamation of European immigrants whose current value is political correctness. We, as American First Nations peoples, admit that we have failed by giving up our assigned mission given to us by the Creator to be gatekeepers of this land with the ability to give blessing and honor through protocol. We have failed to pass on our positive cultural values, deep spirituality to the next generation of young people. Therefore, because we have failed to respond to our past persecutions by maintaining our calling, which was given to us by the Creator, we have instead reacted negatively by medicating the pain through alcohol, drugs, suicide, poverty, and do freely admit our failures against our purposes and cultural mandates. We now agree to begin walking the path of reconciliation and healing by humbly admitting these failures, both past and present. We also freely confess our failures and of our forefathers. We admit that once intimate relationships with the Creator has become too casual, and that reconciliation with Him through the peacemaker is our first priority. We freely admit that we have substituted sacred cultural worship through the drum and flute and dance with our priority on materialistic competitions and public tourist spectacles, which has lost our focus and broken our sacred covenant with the Creator. We have believed the lie that our regalia and traditional values and sacred indigenous native instruments of worship were evil and of the devil and needed to be burned. This has left our youth without cultural roots and structure, and we've allowed many to wander away from tribal family. We agree that Native Americans, in accordance with the teachings of the Creator's Son, that we need to forgive our enemies who have tried to destroy us and our culture. We agree to take personal responsibility for our personal failures, including the ways we have reacted, which has not demonstrated the Creator's heart of love and forgiveness, needed to heal our hearts and cultural soul. We agree to begin reconnecting with our mission and calling as First Nations people. We believe that our land once again be healed through forgiveness and sacred worship. We admit that because of our neglect, we have allowed other forms of spiritual darkness from other cultures to be integrated into our sacred spirituality, which is contrary to the teaching of the medicine wheel. And I have done a video on the medicine wheel. And it goes on to describe what this covenant is. And if you want to have a copy of this, just email me at agapedan1@aol.com and I'll send you a copy. That's AGAPEDAN, the number 1 at AOL. And so it has, basically one of the articles is First Peoples of America and Turtle Island affirm to respect, recognize, and honor our identity as diverse peoples. Also to honor our elder brother, the tribe of Joseph, from whom our tribal roots originate. First Peoples of Turtle Island, as a healed, restored, released people, affirm and co-labor as partners in transformation of one another, along with government agencies and political agencies and spiritual organizations. We will walk together in peace, prosperity, and freedom, are committed to the restoration, advancement, and promotion of moral and spiritual integrity in our society, and to the healing and release for all negative past. And we desire the healing of our land. And there's much more in this covenant that I could read, but I'm not going to do that at this time. I'm going to conclude this by simply doing a drum song on healing of the land. And I'm going to adjust this camera so that you can see a little bit of the drum as well. It's all right. Okay. Hopefully you can see it. Still can't see it. It's all right. Here we go. And this song is called Heal the Land, and I'm offering a prayer for the healing of the land in our culture at this time.